Now, the most trusted name in radio, Rhett Palmer, the mayor of the airwaves.
"20 years with the Secret Service, 20 years with the Secret Service." Don Bell, his struggle from struggle to zero.
Struggle to zero.
To zero, which is
I was so far below zero that I had to struggle to get to zero. I'm not kidding you.
Now you have 11 siblings.
I have 10 brothers and sisters.
Wow, Kentucky.
Born in Kentucky.
Yeah, and then we've got now you have 3 children.
I have 3 children.
One of which is a guest in the studio here.
Yep, right.
And we have you worked with. Okay, who did he work with? This is amazing, folks. He's worked with former U.S. President Truman, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, George Bush. His book is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Vero Beach Book Center, etc. And he tells it all in this book, the inside stories behind the scenes. So if we were having a cup of coffee on a late Friday afternoon and you wanted to tell a story that would impress me from behind the scenes, what's the first story that comes to mind that you covered in this book, a short version of something we might not know about a president?
Well, one short version would be President Lincoln.
You were working with President Lincoln?
No, but about a former president. You know.
I knew you were in your 80s, but not 180.
When he was in D.C., of course, they had he did not have any Secret Service protection or whatever.
Yeah.
And every so often he would get on his horse and ride down to the old soldiers' home, located down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Would he really?
And on the way back one night, he was coming back to the White House. He was on his horse, and all of a sudden, a bullet ripped through the top of his, what do you call them, those stovepipe hats, went right through there, and missed him, of course, missed his head. And there was a young, I believe a soldier there in the area that witnessed that. And he told the young soldier to never mention this, never say anything about it.
I wonder why.
Because at that time, as you know,
there could be copycats.
The country was in such chaos with the Civil War going on, and he did not want to come out with any publicity that would aggravate the situation or whatever.
You know what amazes me?
Anyway,
and
that's
of course, you like
little,
Lincoln because he's a Kentuckian, right?
Well, imagine, yeah.
Now, you know what amazes me is the wisdom that God gives to some people. Like, for instance, George Washington. Mm-hmm. Now, he was shot at 3 times. They found 3 bullet holes in his cape. His horse, while he was on horseback, he never reached his skin, never killed his horse. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, he had been a surveyor of the land. Mm-hmm. Now, the benefit to that is later on, he was a young man. Later on in life, he knew the lay of the land. So he said, no, they're going to come from over here. We're going to be up on this hill. And it gave them a big advantage. Mm-hmm. Secondly, he had humility. Because when they wanted to make him King Washington, he said, nothing doing. This is president. And then they wanted him to run a 3rd time. He says, no, twice is enough. Mm-hmm. I mean, what humility. Because most of them would grapple for the grab for that. They want their silly egos, you know, and you hear the greatness. So I often wonder where some of these people, John F. Kennedy, whatever you think about him, okay, he's not perfect. Maybe he slept with some other girls, whatever, that's his business.
Yeah, that's
but he was a bona fide hero. Mm-hmm. And that U-boat, when it got cut in half, right? And he saved those soldiers and took them on his back, hurting his back permanently, and saved their lives, bringing them to that island. That's a known fact. And we have George Bush. You worked with George.
Right. Oh, yes.
And George was a bona fide hero. He was shot down in his fighter jet, right?
Age 19.
Age 19, and he survives it.
He survives it.
What is
he
this?
He was lucky, yes.
Did he land it on land? Or
I think he landed in water. I believe he did land in water.
Did he parachute out?
Yes, he did parachute out. And I believe he landed right in the water.
And that guy jumped out of airplanes later. Remember for his birthday, he used to jump out of airplanes?
Well, he always did that. He did that until he was 9.
The last time I saw him was in Kennebunk at St. Anne's, and we had taken all the chairs outside to put them up, so we're looking at the ocean, beautiful summer day, and there he was to my left. I was in the front row, so was he with Barbara, And later on, I spoke to him. Always made me laugh. Every time I met that guy, he would be fun. I used to have these baseball cards with my picture on it because they used to have the baseball cards for the sheriff's department. So when I first started out 30 years ago, I had my picture on there, something everybody wants.
Yep.
But it listed that I'd interviewed Garth Brooks and Billy Graham and, General Colin Powell, all these people. Anyway, to give me some credibility. But anyway, so we're there talking, and it's the first time I met him. I said, well, Bert Lee lives in Vero Beach. Oh, yeah, how's Bert doing? Bert's the former physician to the president at the White House. He's now passed.
Right.
But so the media was backing off. They were done, all the excitement. I went up to the podium, and I said, yeah, we're talking. And then I handed him my card. He looks at it, he goes, well, this doesn't look like Bert.
Speaking of George Washington, he died. Are you aware of how he died?
George Washington?
George Washington at the end.
No.
Okay.
I know he had wooden teeth.
He actually had rhinoceros teeth. They put got the mixture from the rhinoceros, and they then put the rhinoceros teeth in there. Oh, they use rhinoceros, teeth, whatever. But anyway, at the end, what he did, of course, back then, he had to ride a horse everywhere. And in the wintertime, he had been out on his horse riding, and it was raining and everything. And
how old?
How old? This was like just a few weeks before he died.
Hey, Siri, at what age did President George Washington die? We'll find out momentarily. Oh, my word. He was an old man. He was only 67. That's 3 years younger than I am. And what, about 13 or 14 years younger than you?
He caught influenza, and he was bedridden. And, of course, they had their doctors to come in and out and prescribe this and that for him. He was bled like 14 times starting off. And then they put together this concoction of butter, molasses, and another ingredient. It was awful.
They had
mixed
to be
it up,
guessing about all
but
this
the purpose of that was they wanted him to regurgitate and try to cleanse his system using this molasses and butter and another whatever ingredient. So they kept doing that and coming in this and that. But anyway, in the end, so he really literally died on the chamber pot in his bedroom.
The thing is, what's bad here is that he died from having pneumonia.
Right.
Well, also Peter the Great, Peter the Great, Russia, he was great. He went into the water. A common person was drowning. He jumps into the wintry water, saves the person's life, and then gets pneumonia and dies. So you know what the moral of this story is with Washington and Peter the Great? Live in Florida. Studies show you live at least up to 20 years longer by living in Florida.
And talking about other presidents who had been shot or whatever, President Andrew Jackson, he still had a bullet lodged in his chest as a result of being in a duel. He was in numerous duels. Okay.
This was who? President who?
President Andrew Jackson.
Yeah.
And that's the reason in Kentucky and maybe in other states, part of taking the oath of office that
Is he the one that killed Hamilton?
No.
In a duel?
Alexander Hamilton. That was Burr, Aaron Burr, Vice President of the United States. Aaron Burr was the one that killed Hamilton right across the...
And did he become Vice President after that?
He was Vice President at the time.
Oh, my word.
And they had the duel across the river from downtown New York City, right across in New Jersey. Over there, they had to be 24 feet apart.
Imagine that today. The Vice President of the United States today had a duel.
He did.
And shot and killed the man.
He killed him. He shot him right there. And then after that, he took off back to D.C.
Aaron Burr?
Right. And...
he was afraid of retribution, probably from his family members.
Yes, really.
Because Hamilton was a well-respected man.
Oh yeah, he was the father of our financial system.
He put a lot of money into our Revolutionary War, correct?
Right. He is. Believe me, he is the father of our federal U.S. government financial system that we have today.
It'd be interesting when you study the history of Jesus. The people that are in the lineage from King David. They said that the Messiah, the God prophesied the Messiah will come through the lineage of King David. And you've got I mean, this is God. I mean, Moses himself murdered a man who was abusing Hebrew. We got David. He sent Uriah to the front to the what do you call it, the front line, so he would be killed, so he could then take his wife and marry her, which he did, and then the prophet, of course, dealt with him with that. But anyway, I mean, you've got women that were prostitutes or not living very holy lives. I mean, this is all in the lineage of Jesus. So the good thing about this is it proves that God is very forgiving. And how interesting would it be, for instance, who was the second president?
John Adams.
Exactly. And John Adams, now they have a thing called Alcoholics Anonymous today. And a lot of people are having a hard time with addictions. Did you know that his one son was addicted? His one son became president. His other son drank himself to death. Right. There was no Alcoholics Anonymous. There was nobody that knew it was a disease back then. So what I'm saying is, in the closet of all these people that we think are so noble and high and mighty, they too have a colorful background, shall we say.
Yeah. In fact, John Adams' son, John Quincy Adams, was quite an interesting individual. You know, he was the first president of the United States to be photographed, okay?
Really?
Photographed. And it took place after he was president, but he was the president of the United States. He was the very first one in 1848 to be photographed. And again, one of the things about him, an interesting anecdote, really. Every day during the summer, most every day, if he had an opportunity in the morning, what he would do, he would take his aide and go down to the Potomac River.
Yeah.
And there was a boat there, a canoe, whatever, and his aide would go out in the middle of in the Potomac River, and he would be on the shoreline. And what he would do, he would get into nude. He swam in the nude out to the canoe and back, maybe 2 or 3 times or whatever. And he did this as often as he could. Mm-hmm. And a newspaper reporter named Anne Royal, she was one of the local, he was the newspaper reporters for
She photographed him in the nude?
No, what happened, she found out that this was his routine.
Yes.
So she wanted to interview him.
Oh.
Okay. So she...
You mind if I put my clothes on
well,
first?
I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. This is true. And so I guess she was a reporter for the beginning of the Washington Post or whatever. This was way back, when he was president. But anyway, she went down to the shoreline where his clothes were laying, and she then yelled to him, about she wanted to interview him and this and that, and she would not move until he consented. I'm not kidding you. Until he consented for an interview, and so he finally consented, and she went back while he came back to the shoreline, put on his clothes, and he was interviewed by. Her name was Anne Royal, Royal. Okay, so that was a sort of an interesting little thing about him, and of course he had 2 sons there, and they attended Harvard University, and he was very adamant about them being in the top 10% of their class at Harvard. Mm-hmm. One of his sons' name was Charles. So anyway, on the way back
on him, yeah.
On the way back from Christmas vacation, whatever, back then they took a boat from Harvard down the shoreline down to D.C. And so he was so afraid to come back and face his father that he jumped out and committed suicide. He drowned.
No.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. So he was a very strict father in regards to his sons being in the top 10% of the class at Harvard. So that's another little. But he was the only first president. He went back and he became a congressman, and he remained a U.S. congressman until he died. And every year he would introduce a resolution to outlaw slavery. Every single year, one of the first things he did was he tried to get a law passed, Congress to pass a law outlawing slavery. Now, this was way back. So anyway, that's a little interesting thing about John Quincy.
Well, it's I knew of a little boy in Poughkeepsie, New York, who had his driver's license, and he did bad on his test in school in Poughkeepsie. And if you go over the Poughkeepsie Bridge, there's a wall there where you have to make a sharp right turn because there's a mountain there. And he drove it himself right into the mountain, killing himself as a young boy. because he was embarrassed to have the low grades. My word, I mean,
but
you know,
another thing,
what shame does to people.
Let's get back to Benjamin Franklin. Okay, he had children, and one of his sons named Charles. He was the 13th governor of the state of New Jersey. 13th governor, Charles.
Yeah.
Okay, you can look him up. And so what after he became governor, he became a loyalist to the British government, and he left the United States.
This was after the Revolutionary War.
Yes, yes. He went back to England and remained there the rest of his life.
I wonder why.
Well, back then, you had people. It's like the Civil War, whatever.
Well, I can understand this.
Loyal to that.
It was more civil. It was more civil, but sophisticated and civil. You kind of go, well, here I am with the Pilgrims, and here I am with Davy Crockett.
Right.
And it's kind of like I'm hanging out with the blue collars, and kind of like, I'd like to go back and sit at a nice table with fine linen and gold silverware or silverware that's really silverware and gold goblets or whatever. And, where everything, there's a great order, law and order, and proper manners.
Right.
And, you can see it today. I mean, it's hard to find. When I was younger and you were younger, we had clubs. Some of them were all men clubs. Oh, yeah. Well, you went in there and they had Queen Anne's chairs. And there'd be guys smoking cigars and pipes. But everybody was a gentleman. They acted like gentlemen. And then I remember going into the Fort Orange Club. I didn't even know it's still in business in Albany, New York. You would sit down. One waiter would come over quietly, hand you the menu while the other was lighting the candle and the third one was pouring the glass of water. You'd be having conversations like we're having, and you wouldn't even know that your water glass had been refilled. They were so non-invasive. It was real elegance and real service, proper service. But it's hard to find that today. So I can understand being here and wanting to go, oh, it would be nice to go back where people have a bath every other day. You'd run into people here that hadn't bathed in a year. Of course.
Well, there's some countries where they don't believe in taking a bath every day because it's bad for your skin.
Well, they know now you actually shouldn't overbathe. You get rid of all the good bacteria. Right. But the kings and queens of old would go through the winter. Right. They don't realize when you got up in the morning, the king would have to break the ice in the commode to wash his face because it would turn to ice. They had a fireplace over there, but it was cold. And
but yeah, I mean it was unbelievable. Okay, one day I was somewhere and I saw this book. It said, "Which president killed an individual?" That was the title of the book. I have it at home, whatever. And I said, "Whoa, wait a minute! I'm going to have to get this." So anyway, I bought it and I read it. Which president killed an individual?
Hold on, let me think.
Okay, now this was okay. It was
I don't know.
Grover Cleveland.
When he was
sheriff of the county there in Buffalo. I forget the name of the county that Buffalo's in.
He killed those gang members?
Well, no, what happened? No. While he was sheriff, they arrested this individual who had murdered someone or whatever. And he was the one that gave the command to hang him. Okay? And that's what the title of that book was, well, which president killed someone?
So it's a little bit of a
twist.
So even back then, the press was manipulating us into buying.
Really, I mean, that's what happened. But that was his obligation. I mean, he had to do it because he was county sheriff. Then he went from there to governor.
Well, look, the press made a hero of Jesse James. He was just a punk.
Right. He was an outlaw who robbed people. And then eventually, I think at the end, they were responsible for murdering some people or whatever. So.
Well, he himself got murdered by one of his partners.
Yeah.
He was up on the ladder fixing a light or something, and boom, shot him in the back of the head. And that's really, what a coward to shoot somebody behind her.
Just one more quick thing about President Cleveland, okay?
Yeah.
Now, he became president, and then he was defeated when he ran again, and then when he ran again, he won and all that. And he got married in the White House, okay? And they had a daughter. Her name was Ruth, little girl. I mean, she was the darling of the press. Oh, my goodness. Oh, it was great, man, and this and that. And as a result of her being so popular, the Nestle Candy Company made the Baby Ruth candy bar.
Well, how do you like
it's
that?
named after Grover, President Cleveland's daughter, Ruth.
And what's named after Teddy Roosevelt?
Oh my! Wait a minute.
What is named after Teddy Roosevelt?
What is it? A human or what? What is it?
Wait a
minute, Teddy Roosevelt. Oh,
Fluffy.
Fluffy.
Stuffed.
The bear.
Yes, Teddy Bear.
Teddy Bear. Sure. Yeah,
that's it.
And he had one of his eyes put out by he always sparred with the heavyweight champion of the world back then in the White House.
He lost an eye.
Yes, he did. Well, they were sparring and he hit him in his eye. It was like
while he was president.
Yeah. Walter, what was this? He was a heavyweight champion at the time.
Well, he was a rough and tumble guy anyway.
So that's the reason he wears those guys.
Because of Teddy Roosevelt, here in Vero Beach, Florida, just above here, is a town called Sebastian. And they have the Pelican Island that's a preserve.
I'm telling you.
That's because of Teddy Roosevelt.
That's right.
He was the outdoors man's outdoors man.
He was unbelievable. And
man's man.
After his first when his first wife died, I mean, he was really and truly in love with his first wife. Yeah. And she died, beautiful lady. Mm-hmm. And he was so taken back by her death that he had every photograph, every item in that house removed to totally wipe out any reminder of her, because he was so just so taken back by her death. And then he married again, and then with his second wife. Now, Alice Longworth Roosevelt was a daughter from his first wife, and she lived to be like almost 100, and she lived to be in the 60s. Okay, but anyway, and he had about, I think, 5 or 6 children with his second wife. But he was
so. Tell me, what was it like to know Abe Lincoln?
Here
we got all these modern day presidents you worked with.
Well,
We're talking about these other guys. But people don't realize that Lincoln got off the train in Gettysburg and walked by himself to Gettysburg to give that address, which he said would long not be remembered. Mm-hmm. That he didn't know he was walking into history. He spoke for 2 minutes. The man before him had spoken for 1 hour, blah, 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 blah. After Lincoln spoke, that man said, why, that man said what I wanted to say and couldn't for an hour. He said it in 2 minutes.
And another thing,
there's greatness, brevity.
Did you know that Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederate States, he was born in Kentucky, and then Lincoln was born in Kentucky.
Yep.
And one day, while I was with the Secret Service in our office in Louisville, I was tooling down to Fort Campbell, down in western Kentucky, and I just wasn't paying attention. And lo and behold, I looked up, and there was a Washington Monument. I mean, whoa! Wait a minute.
Would you hand me that hat, please?
Wait a minute.
Go ahead.
Washington Monument out in the middle of nowhere, and in Fairview, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And I was, as I say, on the way down to Fort Campbell for an investigation. And so what there is this 355-foot monument, a replica of the Washington Monument in honor of Jefferson Davis, right there out in the middle of nowhere, but the state keeps it up, okay? It's a beautiful little, they really do a good job of that. But anyway, so a lot of people don't realize that Jefferson Davis was also born in Kentucky.
Yeah.
And so you had President Lincoln and Jefferson Davis.
Now, I want to let you something
here.
Now, do you see any similarities?
That is...
No.
Yeah, well, wait a minute. Oh, Lincoln?
Yep. I'm related to Abraham Lincoln.
You need to darken...
Direct relation to Abraham Lincoln.
You need to darken your beard.
Yep, darken my beard, darken my face, get thinner.
Right, and so...
You know what amazes me, though? The nobility of character.
Mm-hmm.
Where does now here you take this skinny little itinerant attorney who self-taught, was not officially educated. And by the way, when you went to Harvard back then, that was a church school. That was a school. It was what do you call it? Biblical school, ministerial school. So was Yale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And but anyway, both of them have turned kind of antichrist at this point.
There's so many things that the average individual citizen of our country doesn't know, but they would not have any reason to know, because these things are not taught in school.
You know who else was a great president?
Calvin Coolidge.
The only thing to fear is fear itself.
Right, and Calvin Coolidge is another one of
I've
my
been to
favorite
his home. up
Yeah.
in
He-
Vermont.
He was born in Plymouth Notch, Vermont.
I've been there many times.
Really?
I've been to his house. I've
Yeah.
been to the store that his father ran. And Calvin Coolidge, actually made the table. I mean, the bar that it's still open to this day. What else? Oh, he's the one that. Now, some people say they're trying to say he didn't write it now. But growing up, remember it says, "Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb." Blah blah blah. You know, the world's filled with. All these people highly educated that they're not successful, and this one's not successful. But he says, persistence alone is omnipotent. Remember that famous saying? Hey, Noah, could you find the quote by Calvin Coolidge that says, it says, unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Persistence alone is omnipotent. In other words, that it wins out in the long run.
Right. But what he did, of course, he went on to become governor of Massachusetts,
Yeah.
And then from there, he became president.
He was great.
And he balanced the budget, and he was responsible for the Roaring *20s.
He had a heartache, too. His son was killed while he was in, remember?
It was disaster. He had 2 of his, I think, kids that died young, and it took a toll on.
Oh, of course it did.
And like Franklin Pierce, he had his little son Benny to die in a train accident.
Lincoln lost
from
his
Boston,
son.
Lincoln, and this really just devastated.
Okay, here it is. I'm going to read it. Nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. Talent will not. Nothing is more common. And would you mind to print this out later for me? I'll let you take it with me. Talent will not. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful men with talent. Genius will not. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education will not. The world is full, and we know this, of educated derelicts. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. The slogan, "Press on," has solved and always will solve the problems of the human race. And I want to tell this to people who are out there listening, especially young people. I've been on the air 30 years. I've had about 18 kids who said, "Oh, I want to be in radio. I want to be in radio." "Oh, you do?" I said, "Come down next Monday. Can you come next Monday?" "Yeah, I want you to come down, and you can learn how to run the show. Then you can even sit in here and be my co-host for a day. We'll teach you all about it." So out of the 18, maybe 8 showed up.
Sure.
Out of the 8 showed up, 4 showed up twice. And out of them, nobody showed up against one kid who ended up, who was a barista, and he didn't even want to be on the air. He did. He wanted to have a podcast, but he ended up selling for us, making tens of thousands of dollars to help put himself through college. But my point is this. Whoever you are, wherever you are, whatever age you are, there is no competition because most people are weenies. They have not the courage. Look, I stopped getting no's years ago with my music in New York City. By the time I was 17, I was taking the train down. I got turned down by all the publishers, and I got turned down again. Then I got turned down by the publisher in Nashville. So I said I'd never quit because of that thing I just read. I'm never going to quit. But I quit what they call softly. I stopped getting rejection slips. I didn't think I'd quit, but I fooled myself. I had quit. And what I'm saying to whoever you are, if you have a dream, go at it. Look, God didn't use Moses till he was 80. You're putting out this book. How old are you now?
Oh, my God. I was born in 1940. I can't say my age. Okay, don't force me.
So
No,
you're
I'm just
13, you're
Oh, don't tell
83.
me.
83.
Well, yeah.
No. Yeah, but you're just getting started.
Right.
My friend in town here, David Walsh,
Yeah, I know him.
he will be 98.
I know him.
He'll be 98 June 4th. Still runs his real estate firm. Now, at this point, he's going in every other day, but he still goes into his real estate firm. He told me he came here when he was 70. He was overweight, like me, and I'm 70. So he's a great inspiration to me. He started working out. He went into real estate, and he said last year was the most profitable, and he used to own car dealerships. He said last year was the most prosperous year of his life at 97 years of age. So what was it? Winston Churchill was asked to be the speaker. I just came from a graduation where the guy went blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, Winston Churchill got up and he said, "Don't quit, don't quit, don't quit, don't quit," and sat down.
Never quit. Never quit. Never quit.
And then he sat down. Now, his ego of the moment, he could have droned on for an hour. "I am Winston Churchill, blah, 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 blah. Oh, I'll learn this and I'll learn this and this." Instead, he just said, "Don't quit." Now, he gave up the ego of the moment and said something very valid about not quitting. But guess what? he's dead and gone, and we're still talking about it. If he'd gone on and on again like that guy before Lincoln, who blabbed on for an hour, and when Lincoln spoke for 2 minutes and said, this will not long be forgotten, and that guy said, Lincoln said, what I tried to say in an hour, Lincoln said in 2 minutes. And nobody even knows who that other guy was.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah.
And with those, Churchill's words are still with us today. Iron Curtain. He was the one that came out with the term Iron Curtain. That he saw what was happening in the Soviet Union with Stalin and everything. So he actually came up with that word, that term in Missouri when he came over here to speak in Missouri one time. Yeah.
Well, you heard this lady came up to him and said, it was at night somewhere, and said, she said, you're drunk, Winston Churchill. You are inebriated. He says, Madame, you are ugly. In the morning, I shall be sober.
I know. I mean, really, there's so much.
Well, how about this? You're not allowed to say to your fellow parliamentarian that you're a liar. Mm-hmm. He was reprimanded. Do not call your fellow parliamentarian a liar. So he said that is a something. He said that's an exaggerated inexactitude or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It was like like going back to, say, for example, Thomas Jefferson. Okay.
Yeah, brilliant man.
But, yeah, he was. And you know what he did the first thing he did every morning?
What?
He got a pan of ice water and put it down in front of him, and he soaked his feet every morning in ice water.
Why?
Because he thought it would invigorate the circulation or whatever. He thought it was healthy.
Do you know?
I mean, really, seriously, that's in historical documents or whatever.
Do you know that John F. Kennedy had a whole bunch of geniuses and scientists and medical people in the White House, and they're having a dinner, and he said this is the most intelligent group of people that have ever gathered in the White House, except when Thomas Jefferson dined alone.
That's right. He had 5 Nobel Peace Prize winners. He was taking, as you said.
Yeah, you know the story.
Yeah, oh, I do. He's taking them on a tour through the White House, and when they came to the Jefferson room, that's when he made the statement there.
Isn't that great?
That this room has never had more intelligence in it than when President Jefferson
was there. Tell me something. You got to spend a lot of time at the White House.
Well,
with these different presidents.
Well,
name them in case somebody's just checking out.
Yeah, no.
What presidents did you work with? Truman.
I worked with former President Truman.
Yep.
And President Nixon. And actually, I haven't mentioned this, at the very end, the last 2 months, when President Johnson was president. But anyway, I never was around him as president.
Okay.
But anyway, President Nixon, President Ford.
Yep.
President Carter.
Yep.
President Reagan. And I'll call him Old Man Bush, because in order to distinguish between
he had
the
the
two.
greatest sense of humor of all of them. I've met all of them,
Right.
and Jeb has been on my show. Jeb is my least favorite.
Yeah,
he took himself. I'm glad he didn't get to be president because he had been nice when he was first running before he became governor. He was even nice to me and nobody. But we were talking and stuff. I even had his number, his private phone number. But then he got to be governor suddenly, And the last time I met him, he acted as if he was superior to me when he was going to throw his kids in the ring.
Right.
And, God resists the proud and gives grace to the humble. I'm not really saying that Trump is humble, but there are things about Trump that actually, if you have the eyes, spiritual eyes, he actually is humble. The reason I think he jumps on people is, this is just all conjecture on Rhett Palmer's part, is that Trump was hurt. Somewhere in Trump's past, he was hurt. And Donald Trump will be your friend and your advocate and will help poor people. I know stories you wouldn't believe that he's helping people. But if you throw a pebble at him, now you're on the crap list. And he will come after you like a dog after your pant leg until he makes you bleed.
Yeah, I was. It's.
So he's not really arrogant. He's self-protective.
He's. Throughout my career, I spent a lot of time in New York City and Manhattan and everything.
Yeah.
During the UN General Assembly and everything, we had to protect. Another thing we had to do as a Secret Service agent, we had to protect foreign heads of state when they came over here for a visit, regardless. It was passed. This law was passed by Congress, and so anyway.
So even if Hitler himself had come here, he would have gotten
I'll tell
protection.
you, when I remember when Arafat came over here one time and spoke before the UN
Yep.
General Assembly there,
Yep.
and he's there talking. This had his hands raised up, and he had a .45 caliber pistol on in his belt, and it showed there was this famous photograph of him, doing this, and there his pistol was. And I was involved in that visit when he came here. And what he did, he flew in one evening at nighttime at LaGuardia Airport, and then he stayed overnight in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel.
Yep.
And then the next day is when he delivered his speech to the UN.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was there at the Waldorf waiting on him to come arrive at the Waldorf. And what happened, I was on the elevator with his security types. And here old Bell from Hornby picking cotton, starving to death, almost whatever.
Country boy,
right. And here I was on the elevator with them going up to their room. And boy, they were like, ooh, they didn't know what to think. They were like, really apprehensive.
Well, he's the one that turned down the Jews had offered to give half the land to the Palestinians and half the land to the Jews, and he wouldn't go along with the.
And
if that guy hadn't been around, we might be having peace today.
So the next evening when he went to his airplane.
Yes.
You know who was there to see him off?
Who?
Only Secret Service agents.
Oh.
Only.
So what does that mean?
No one from the State Department or whatever. But anyway, we saw him off.
But do you know this? What your father did here? That the Secret Service, on just the president, whether it's Obama, Bush, Trump, whoever it is, Biden, it's $800 million about every year, strictly on Secret Service. Now, there are two U.S. ones, U.S. Air Force, because one has all the equipment for medical emergencies. The other one has anyway, so $800 million, that's almost $1 billion. That does not include his wife, his children. That does not include senators, visitors of state, as you just said. Secret Service, probably, it's got to be $2 or $3 billion a year spent.
Sure. Well, you have to. I mean, what choice is there? Because we can't let anything happen to our
Now, you were a
president.
Secret Service guy for 20 years.
Yes.
Are you retired from that?
Yeah.
So you received retirement.
Full retirement, yes. Back then, they had a retirement system plan that you could be
Was it a high-paying job?
Well, it was enough to get by on and have a nice retirement and everything. Yeah, it was a very decent. We got our retirement due to the nature of the job and everything, traveling. My gosh, we've traveled all over the world here, there, and so forth. And due to that, our retirement was better than other federal law enforcement agency retirements. Okay,
yeah, but
so about 10,000 more a year.
People think it sounds glamorous. But
you.
when you wake up, I've done a little bit of traveling with my music career, and you wake up one morning, and I've done this. Where am I? Am I in Shanghai? Am I in Los Angeles? Because every hotel, motel room begins to look alike. I've stayed at the Waldorf, where you mentioned. I met Hillary Clinton there, Jack Nicholson, all these other people. But I tell you what, it turns out it's just another room. Billy Crystal was giving a show in Washington. On Broadway. He had a show on Broadway, so we had bought tickets to see him on Broadway. Well, so anyway, I get into the Waldorf Astoria, and this little Filipino man was there, an old man. He's bringing my luggage upstairs. I'm thinking, I should be carrying the luggage. He's an old man. This is something's wrong here. So anyway, we get to my room, and he and I got along great. Salamat. My grandfather worked in the Philippines, building roads. Anyway, so we got along great. We're laughing, having a fun time. And I said, does this look like a king size? Look how big I am. He goes, wait here, Mr. Palmer. So he goes downstairs, comes up with a set of keys. He grabs the luggage, says, follow me. So we go upstairs, and I walk in. And if you know anything about New York City, at the Waldorf Astoria, if you're going to get a room, you're talking, a bad room is $1,000 a night. This thing probably was $15,000 a night. He says, here, come in. It had a living room, a dining room, a little kitchen area, and a private bedroom, 2 bathrooms. He says, this belonged Billy Crystal. But Billy Crystal doing show on Broadway, which we had tickets to.
Oh.
He says, so he's got his own condo over near the theater. So I give you this. So I got to stay in Billy Crystal's room.
Yeah, it
And
was.
that night I was watching him on stage, and I said, hey, I'm going to use your bathroom tonight.
Hey, another one thing, going back to former President Truman.
Yeah.
While I was out there, I was as a young agent. They sent me out there to be with him for a while during the summer, whatever. And about the second night I was there, myself and another agent, we were on duty, and we had our office in his library. Okay, and we had these the alarms or whatever. They carried an alarm in their hand.
Yeah.
If they pushed a button, it would set off the alarm over in the library in our office. So I was new, I was sitting there, blah blah blah. And Jerry, the other agent, he was in the bathroom. Okay, I'm not saying that was a setting. That's exactly what happened. And I was just there, and all of a sudden that alarm went off, and of course he knew what it meant. I didn't really, it was an alarm or whatever, and I did not realize that was the first time that alarm ever went off, where they had to use it. And so,
What was it?
Well, okay. So what happened? He comes running out from the bathroom. I'm not kidding. We jump in our car and hit Buzz right down the road to his residence, And there's a little there's a little alley that goes right to the rear of their home, 3-story white house, whatever. And so, and we see these two women there, a mother and a daughter, as it turned out. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll say, okay, so we go up and, we interview them and everything. And the reason they were there is that the daughter's husband was in the Army, active in Army, and so she was pregnant and she was scheduled to have a baby, and so she was he had not contacted her for like several months, and she was they came to see former President Truman to see if he could help in getting her in an Army hospital to have that child. And so we determined there was no threat or whatever. And of course, we wrote up the report and it was turned in and blah, blah, blah. And of course, guess what? Of course, all he had to do was get on the phone and he fixed everything. But anyway, that was just one of those little incidents that would take place. And he took care of the situation and he got her into an Army hospital. But anyway, we could go on.
So let's see. I'm going to ask you, because we could spend all day doing
yeah,
this.
I could do. We could
but tell me
talk
something. Is
20
there?
24
Now, I
hours.
thought Ronald Reagan had a great sense of humor.
He did.
Were you with him the day that he was shot?
I was not but I was right after he was elected president.
Yeah.
I was among the first group of Secret Service agents that was assigned to his ranch. He had never been there at that point, So we were sent out there to secure that 633-acre ranch.
California.
In California on the mountain north of
San Diego, right?
Well, not north of whatever. But anyway, my mind's going okay. But
His
anyway,
museum is there today.
yeah, it is there today. But anyway, we were the first group of Secret Service agents to secure that ranch, 633 acres. Okay, and we had a temporary command post set up because this was new, and so later on, while I was out there 3 weeks, and later on he came out for a visit to the ranch while we were there, and I was sitting there in our command post where we had our communications and everything, and the phone rings, and I picked it up. And he says, "Well, this is Ronald Reagan." Okay, he was down at the ranch house. He says, "Well, I've received this gift from one of my Jewish friends, and I'm trying to determine exactly the meaning of this gift. Would you have anyone there
Who's Jewish?
that was Jewish that could help me?" And I looked around and no, we didn't have anyone. And he said, "Well, thank you very much," and this and that. But they were out there for several days right
What was
after
it
he
that he
was
got?
elected. I don't know.
Oh.
I did not ask him. He was, and so he was there for a few days. They rode around and this and that,
Sure.
and that ranch was 8 miles high. We had to drive 8 miles up that sucker, this narrow road. I mean, but
Okay,
anyway,
this is what I want to say. Okay,
Okay.
hold on. So I get to meet President Ford, and we set up an interview. It's a long story. I won't go through the whole story. So the next day I'm supposed to interview him. Well, anyway, so I go down on the elevator, and there he is eating in the dining room of this hotel in South Florida. Now, there's a Secret Service agent there, one there, one there, one there, and they've quarantined him off for this big section. There's one light that's on. He's there alone reading the newspaper. And my reaction was, once you're president, you never get to not be president. Can you imagine right now if I'd been president, they're waiting around right now, and I go, well, I got to go to the bathroom. Hold on, I got to go check the bathroom. Palmer wants to go to the bathroom. Oh, my God, that's not freedom. Michelle Obama has said, I wish I could go back to Target and shop like a normal human. Tell you what, we need to be appreciative. Fame and fortune is not.
No, it's not.
And first of all, the fame of man is fleeting. You know Paul McCartney from the Beatles? You know who that is? Okay. Well, he was on the Academy Award, not the Academy Awards. Maybe it was the Academy, or it was the Grammys. This is maybe 10 years ago. And so, the number one tweet among 16-year-old girls around the world is what I read, was told to me, whatever, was that, who's Paul McCartney? The fame of man is fleeting. I asked, we were right here yesterday, right? Weren't we, Noah? And we asked, no, you didn't know who Daniel Boone was, right? Huh? Wednesday. He didn't know who, someone was in here saying that this person didn't know who Daniel Boone was, and he didn't know who Daniel Boone was. So, and then on top of that, we have problems, because I ran into, this whole thing with the Palestinians and the Jews now, and where all this prejudice comes from. And I was talking to a kid down at an upscale sweater shop down in South Florida, West Palm, Palm Beach, whatever. It's not West Palm, and it's not Palm Beach, it's Palms, whatever.
Palm City?
Yeah, maybe. No, not Palm City.
Palm Bay.
No,
City?
it's where they have, it's right next to Palm Beach, but it's called Palm Beach Gardens. It's Palm Beach Gardens. Anyway, so he's 24. He says, well, talking about the Holocaust and stuff. And he said, well, they don't teach us history in school anymore. No. And that's a control. We've had great warnings from great men said, when they stop teaching you history, watch out. Because those who don't know history are destined to repeat it, and this is the way you control people. So somebody's got their nose where it doesn't belong. Right. And there's a skunk in the woodpile, and I hope they find out who those people are and exorcise them out of this country.
Really?
I mean, because you've lived long enough to know, you're 83 years of age. There are people that have said things like death to American stuff. Oh, yeah. There was a time you would be arrested for that and put up on charges of traitorous behavior, right?
Yeah, it's totally. I've lived long enough to. I had one of my oldest brother and the oldest member of my family, a child, and so forth. He was in World War II 5 years. He went in 40 and got out in 45, and he was at Pearl Harbor when it was bombed. But he was lucky. What happened when the first bombers came in? What they did, they hustled the other personnel, Army personnel there, to relocate the other airplanes from where they were parked. They had to repark the airplanes. So that's he was there, and I'll tell you, man, and he went through that. He was there 5 years in the Pacific and in Europe. He was involved in the bombing of Dresden.
Oh, that's
and
terrible.
He was a tail gunner.
That's really sad, what we did to Dresden.
Yeah, but he
not necessary.
But anyway, so
that was wrong,
really
wrong.
And so, but they had to do it. And so, but anyway, one time they came in for landing. He said every time they went out on a bombing mission, they drew fire. There was a bullet hole, at least one or more in his airplane. So they came in one time, and the plane had really been shot up. So they were landing there in London, or outside London.
Yeah.
And so they had to make a hard landing. Yeah. So when they came down and made that hard landing, that plane broke in two. Yes, the nose part and the captain and so forth, they went one in one direction, and he was in the tail as a tail gunner, and he was there riding that thing in.
Oh, my word.
Yes, and his buddy, they had two levels of tail gunners, one upper and lower, and his buddy had been shot, and so he was telling me, you're talking about a ride scooting down that runway, that tail gun. But anyway, so these guys, they 5 years, and I can understand when they get upset when someone's downgrading our country. It is awful. But anyway, so much for that. But anyway, but we could go on and on about
We're out of time for today, but listen.
Really? Okay.
From Don Bell, Struggle to Zero. And, of course, you see the book between us on the screen.
Yeah.
It's available everywhere in bookstores everywhere. He was a Secret Service
Amazon.
agent for over 20 years. It's on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, Vero Beach Book Center. And, of course, you can find it at all kinds of places. Don Bell, he worked with President Truman, Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, George Bush. We'll be doing more interviews, I hope, in the future. And catch his new ad that will be in Vero's Voice magazine. The magazine.